Welcome to Between the Before and After, a podcast about the stories that shape us. I'm your host, Coach John McClernand, and each episode I bring you an inspiring guest with a moving story that shines a light on the power of the human spirit. Before we dive in, I want to let you know about two very important things. Number one, the stories shared here are often gritty, raw, and vulnerable, and very likely will include speaking about sensitive topics suited for a mature audience. Number two, this podcast is also broadcast live on YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook. So on whatever platform you follow myself or Freedom Nutrition Coaching, you have the opportunity to participate in this discussion during the live stream. And we encourage your participation both by commenting and asking questions. And so this podcast is about exploring the stories that take place between the before and after photos, not just in the realm of weight loss, but in all areas of life. So let's dive in. All right, welcome back. I have to say this is a first for me, and I've done over 70 episodes of this show, but I have not yet interviewed a ninja, let alone a warrior queen. So I am super excited to have Cheryl on the show today. Cheryl, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you doing, Coach John?
I am absolutely fantastic. I'm in a super good mood because I was really excited for this interview today. Before we dive into your story, because you do have quite the story, you didn't just start out as a badass warrior ninja. There's a bit of a road to get there, and we're going to explore that story today. But for those who are listening, where are you at right now? Because I do see, for those who are watching, there's a book behind Cheryl here, and I believe it's titled The Reluctant Ninja. So how did you get, so what are you doing currently, I guess? And what does a reluctant ninja do in day-to-day life currently?
Okay, well, that's a really interesting question. So basically, when I'm not, trying to beat crime and hanging out, at the dojo beating up bad guys, I pretty much do what everybody else does. Right now I'm thinking about what I'm going to make for dinner tonight. I like to read. I like to hike. I like to dance. I'm a dancer. So I do a lot of things in life. And I call myself a recovering physical therapist because I'm a non-traditional PT. And physical therapy was my second career. And I do love to advertise myself as a physical therapist who hates exercise and thinks that chocolate is food, because it is.
Yes, I love that. That's awesome. Where are you located?
I'm located in Denver, Colorado, so right at the foot of the Rocky Mountains, Mile High City.
Beauty. I'm just a couple hours north of you if you drove straight north through Montana on the east side of the Rocky Mountains, and so we're connected by the same mountain range as well as an internet connection. So
absolutely, and it would be a lovely drive too. I just have to say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I don't know. Would you pass through Utah? Get from Colorado? Could you potentially go through Utah and some of those really cool orange like rock formations and things?
No, I don't think so. I think we would just go straight north and through like Wyoming, Montana, and what else? Oh, and then I think it'd be right across the border.
Then you'd be across the border in Alberta, where I am. And Wyoming's famous for something or other. There's only like 200,000 people that live in Wyoming, I think, if I have it right. Like it's not all that populated, but there's got to be something interesting to see there.
There is. Is it? Oh my gosh, I can't remember. There is a mountain where everybody goes to. This is at the Grand Tetons, I think. It's in Wyoming.
Probably something like that. Well, yeah. Now I'm thinking of like Grey Poupon, which is like a tea.
Grey Poupon? No, that's a mustard.
A mustard. There we go. Sorry, I'm thinking of something else. Clearly, I should stick to my day job of like interviewing people instead of like trying to connect food and geography. So, So you became a ninja, and you became a ninja later in life as well.
I certainly did. I started my training at the tender young age of 47. And I like to tell people I did not go willingly, because I did not. And I call myself a ninja because I actually do study. The art that I study is called Ninpon Tai Jutsu, the art of the ninja. So it's an ancient Japanese martial art based on the art of the ninja and the samurai. So that's, woven all through our training and our art, except it does focus more on the ninja than it does on the samurai. We pride ourselves on being the peasants and, hiding in the grass and all that kind of stuff, hiding in plain sight, which is definitely not very samurai-like. It's more the way of the ninja.
Right. Like, what is the difference between a ninja and a samurai for those who might not know? Because, I mean, I think over here in North American culture, we hear about samurai warriors, but were they like a royal or regal class?
Yeah, they were more the elite. and the
Okay.
upper class. And basically the ninja were the peasants. They were the farmers, and they were just, the grunt workers. And the samurai would oftentimes raid the villages of the ninja.
Mm,
And the ninja, they had no resources like those beautiful, expensive, high quality swords that the samurai had. And the samurai used to love when they would get a new sword, and they would test their blade out by going through the villages and kind of whacking people's heads off to see how effective, their swords were. And they would raid the villages
mm,
oftentimes, and the ninja had to come up with ways of how to defend themselves. And of course, they
right.
didn't have fancy equipment. They didn't have those really
Or like
fantastic
ornate
swords.
armor and like the finest quality steel to make swords and things like that. So, like the samurai don't sound like nice people from what you're describing.
Well, if you're a ninja, they don't sound like nice people, but there's a lot of the rating and stuff, but they were highly respected, and they were
Right.
the ones that would protect, like the upper echelon, the emperors, and the people in power.
Okay.
So they were kind of like their guards and their guardians. But then, of course, the peasants were pretty much free game for them, or fair game. So what the peasants did, they were farmers,
Mhm.
and they would use their tools that they already had, their farm tools, and they would
Right,
use
right.
those and play with different ways of how they could use them to defend themselves. For example, they could be
Huh.
walking, across their fields carrying buckets of water, and they
Mhm.
would have this long stick across their back with buckets of water on each end, because that was the way they would be able to carry more water at one time. Well,
Right, right.
that same, if somebody started coming at you to attack you, even with a sword, off with the buckets, they would have a 6-foot long stick.
Right, okay. And you could use that to hopefully it's, like, thick enough that maybe a sword couldn't cut through it in sort of like one swipe. Would that be similar to, like, I'm thinking of the Ninja Turtles, but like Donatello and his, like, bow staff. Would that be something similar or
I believe so, yes. We call it the Reshackle Bow because it's a 6-foot long bow staff.
okay.
And basically, it wouldn't necessarily be so strong that a sword couldn't cut it, but you would be able to create a 6-foot circle around yourself with twirling the stick and then doing strikes. You have a much farther reach with the
Right.
6-foot long bow staff than the samurai would have with a 3-foot long sword.
Okay. So samurai sword typically would be about 3 feet long then.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Well, this is fascinating. Now, if we're going to rewind the clock a little bit further, like when you were a young girl, did you dream of like becoming a ninja?
No, didn't even know what a ninja was. Of course, when I was a little girl, that was way before the days of the Ninja Turtles.
Right.
We did have superheroes. I didn't want to be any of those things. I always wanted to be a princess, or a ballerina or something. I'm a girly girl. I always
Mhm.
was, even from a very, very young age.
Yeah.
And ooh, no, a ninja, no, ooh, no, who would want to do that? My father actually I had a black belt in karate. I have 4 sisters. So by the time my mom had daughter number 4, I think that's when my dad started to take karate, probably for several reasons. One, more
Right.
way to get him out of the house and to learn some skills to help protect us. And then he tried to get my sisters and I to go to the gym with him so we could learn a few techniques. And there was no way that was going to happen. None of us would go, and we didn't.
Right.
So no, that martial arts was never on my radar. It was never, I thought, in my DNA, but somebody somewhere had other thoughts and other plans for me.
Right, right. So, did you get into any fights growing up?
Only with my sisters. Mhm,
Right, right.
mhm. And actually, I'm number 3. My father actually used to call us by number,
Right, right, yeah.
it's like, what's the point? I'll just call him by number, because he kept getting our names tangled up. And I think my oldest sister, daughter number 1, she and I, when we were kids, we would just go at it like you wouldn't believe. And it was the stupidest decision of my life, because my sisters, both my 2 older sisters, were very robust and healthy. And I was a scrawny, tiny little thing. I was so little and so skinny that my grandmother actually accused my mom of running out of food because she didn't feed me. I was so tiny, but I was just that small. But
Right.
my sister would tick me off. She would just enrage me so much. I remember running across the room and just like diving on top of her. It'd be like a cat on a bear, and it had about the same effect. And we would
Yeah.
just go at it. Oh, and this was only when my parents were not home.
Right. Now,
And we
was
would,
she deliberately trying to enrage you?
oh yeah,
Yeah.
oh yeah,
Okay. Yeah.
of course,
And how many
siblings.
years older is she?
Oh my gosh, let me think. 3.5 years. Three and
Okay.
a half
Yeah.
years. And so much bigger. And then my second older sister, who's only 14 months older than me, she would just watch, and she would kind of follow us around the house as we were beating each other up, screaming and tearing into each other, and I'd be crying. It was terrible. But yeah, that's, so I guess I learned how to fight that way. I don't know, but it wasn't very artful. It wasn't
Right.
very skilled,
It was
and it
just a very,
wasn't very effective.
yeah, it was just sort of a tenacious kind of scrappiness, you know.
Hmm, hmm, hmm.
Yeah. So, getting out of high school, you still didn't have dreams of being a ninja. So, what was your intention?
Out of high school?
Yeah.
Oh, I think I wanted to be a little bit, I don't want to say a ski bum,
Hmm.
because I knew that I was going to be working. When I graduated high school, went straight into college, got a degree in a medical profession, respiratory therapy, and I was skiing. My dad taught us how to ski. I was 9 years old. My two older sisters didn't really take to it the way that I did, but there was something about skiing that I absolutely loved. I wasn't a dancer at the time, but it was, to me, I was dancing in the snow,
Okay.
which is kind of crazy to say that because I'm from Western Pennsylvania originally. And if anybody listening, if you've ever skied in the East, and especially in the mountains of Western Pennsylvania or the hills, you are skiing on bulletproof ice. So you're really not dancing on the snow. You're kind of sliding down on the ice, but you do learn how to carve your turns. So you just have some kind of control.
So, it's just like out of control on a sheer sheet of ice. And
Exactly.
right.
Exactly.
It's not like the nice powder that you get out here on the West Coast.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So, you kind of wanted to be a ski bum, and you were a respiratory therapist, and you're
Mhm.
also a physical therapist as well.
Mhm. Right.
Did that come afterwards?
That came much, much later. Once I graduated college, I moved out here to Colorado with my one of my college roommates. She was originally from Cleveland. We were in our last 2 years of college. We were actually in a very large teaching hospital in the middle of Pittsburgh.
Mm.
And you don't think of Pittsburgh being fun. I know it's an oxymoron, but
Yeah.
Pittsburgh is a really fun city. It was even a fun city back then. That was 1976 to 78. So I'm dating myself.
Yeah.
But fantastic bars and discos and shopping and restaurants, and the nightlife was fantastic. Unfortunately, there was a man involved that he and I had been dating, and we were dating kind of seriously. And when I realized how serious he was getting, it really got a little bit dicey for me. And
You were like,
he
"Uh-oh."
was, yeah, it was And one time we were having a conversation. I was getting this vibe like, I think he's thinking, the big M.
Proposing.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And I was a senior in college, and I even kind of asked him, I said, hey, if you have any plans that include me, you might want to fill me in on it and tell me about it. And he still giggled, and he wouldn't say anything. And finally I said, look, I want a career. I'm going to work full time. I, want to do this. I want to do that. And he got a really confused look on his face. And he said, oh, well, who's going to look after the kids? And I thought, thank you for saying that. So
Thank
he
you for
had
clarifying.
yes, my entire life was planned out. And I broke up with him right away,
Yeah.
but he wouldn't take no for an answer and kept, trying to get back together. And finally it's like, you know what? I think it's time for me to just leave and find my own
Right.
way, you know, see who I really am. And my girlfriend, like I said, she was from Cleveland. She didn't want to go back to Cleveland. Go figure. She didn't
Yeah.
want to stay in Pittsburgh. Go figure. And I said, hey, Berta, why don't we just go to Denver?
Right.
And
Yeah.
she said, okay. So it was like 2 or 3 days after graduating college. The ink was still wet on our diploma. We packed up my 1974 Ford Maverick, and we drove across the country to Denver, Colorado. So we're
Yeah.
both still here.
Yeah. Wow. And that's just a couple of years later. Yeah.
Yeah, just a few. Yeah, just a few years later.
Did you ever have any contact with this ex again after you left? I mean, because you didn't have the internet back then, so.
No, we did not. But wow, what a loaded question. So
There's more details to the story of the ninja here.
Yeah, it gets really kind of crazy and really kind of weird. Yeah, we kind of reconnected 33 years later, and it was 2010. It was the very end of 2010, and I had my own physical therapy office, and my parents had been sick that entire year. So I had been flying back and forth from Denver to Pittsburgh and back home again so I could help them out and blah blah blah. Long story short, they were both dying of the same illness at the same time. They both had leukemia. It was very, very weird and strange. So that last year of their lives, they were playing this really weird game of end stage leukemia poker. It was weird. So my mother passed away on November 8th. And my father passed, and I stayed even, after my mom died to help him. And he passed away 19 days later.
Wow.
So, all this, and I hadn't even been at work, being self-employed. After we closed the house and we did all the things that we had to do, and I came back to work, came back to Denver, went to my office, and I was walking past the mailboxes, and nobody ever sent me mail. I hadn't been there for 3 months, and I figured it's only going to be junk mail.
Sure, yes, a few flyers and a bill
Yeah.
or something like that. Yeah.
So I walked right past it, but then something said, you need to check your mail. I even walked backwards. I went to the mailbox. I opened it up and I looked at the bottom of the mailbox underneath all of these junk flyers and, mailers and stuff. I saw a card sticking out from the bottom. And I knew instinctively at that moment, I recognized the handwriting. I knew who it was from, and it was from him. And apparently he had seen my mother's obituary, and, he felt really bad. And so he wanted to send me a card, and he knew I wasn't in town, and he wanted to know if my sisters were local, if my father must be devastated, blah, blah, blah. And I'm reading this going, well, not anymore. He's not. So
Right.
anyway, exactly. So finally at the very end, he says, I'm only 10 minutes away. If your father needs any help, let me know, which right there is a little bit weird. Hadn't seen this guy in 33 years. My father would probably say, who the hell are you? If he came knocking on his door. And then I realized, I wonder how often he reads the obituary, because my father had passed away. I flipped the envelope over, and it was postmarked the exact date that my father had passed away. So again, it's like, this is too weird. So I wasn't going to respond. He gave me his email address. And for 2 weeks, it's like, do I answer? Do I not? And it's like, nah, I don't know about this.
You're processing quite a bit here.
Yes. Think about that. Think about everything else that was going on.
There's a whole story here that we haven't yet dove into, like that your parents were dealing with like leukemia simultaneously.
End stage. Mm-hmm.
End stage. Yeah. Yeah. So, but we'll come back to that detail, because that in itself is something.
Yeah.
So you're wondering, do I respond? And he left an email address. What year was this?
2010. It was
okay.
December. It was either December 2010 or January 2011. And so the last I had seen of him was, sometime in 1978, the middle of 1978.
Okay. Wow. Yeah.
And I mean, there's even more of a backstory. I'll tell you sometime. It's just craziness. So anyway, I finally said, okay, I will respond. And I says, well, thank you, and because even in the letter he sent me, he goes, I don't know if you remember me or not. And it's like, are you kidding? This is why I live in Denver. But, yeah, I remember you. Thanks, by the way. I love it here. I have a great husband and life is really good. But I didn't say that.
Right.
I just says, of course, I remember you and thank you for your condolences. I really appreciate that. And he always said how gracious my mother always was, when he came over and stuff. And I says, I'm not really sure how often you do look at the obituaries, but unfortunately my father passed away. So, it's all done. So that did start a correspondence between us that was just friendly. And it was really, it was in some ways it was comforting. In a lot of ways, his wife had passed away, which I figured he must have been single if he was reaching out to me. But his wife had passed away from breast cancer and had struggled with that for probably 3.5 or 4 years. I can't remember. But then he had 3 children. One who was just 17 when she died, and the oldest was probably in his early 20s. And the interesting thing is, for as much as I was processing losing my mother, my father, my childhood home, which was a house that my father had built with his own two hands. It was a beautiful house, a stone house, and everything else that I had lost along the way. I was grieving more for a woman I had never met and for children I didn't even know existed. And my heart just really went out to all of them because of what they had lost. I had had my mother until I was 54.
Right. Yeah.
So in that way, it was. So anyhow, as the story continues, I was going back again to Pittsburgh in April to go to my Aunt Stella's bowling banquet. She was 82 years old, and she was receiving an award for being the top female bowler, senior bowler in the entire state of Pennsylvania. That's huge.
At 82, like, how cool is that?
Oh yeah, and I mean, and when we went to the banquet, it was just me. I went by myself, and my sisters too. One of my sisters and my niece. It was a lovely way of celebrating life after everything that we had been through together as a family. Because my aunt and my cousins, I mean, we grew up as one big family. So 8 girls, and we were all very, very close. So it was a wonderful trip. But while I was there, we were going to meet and have dinner. And so we did. So I actually went, out with him, and we had dinner one night, and we had a wonderful time. It was really great. We laughed, we had an awesome time. And all I could think of was, as I was flying home the next day, it was like, did I dodge a bullet?
Wow. Yeah. Isn't that interesting to like see it years later and be like, that could have been me and the life, so yeah.
And I thought about that. It was like, when you think about the decisions we make in life, and the decisions that you have made, which I know your story pretty well since you were on my show, but think of the decisions and the many different pathways that your one life could be. And I thought about even trying to write a story, or maybe even a book about the parallel, the lives. It's like, I could have been living there, a mother, a wife, having no career, bored to tears probably, but this is or I could have stayed in Pittsburgh and maybe just had a nightlife and been single and, maybe, become a ski instructor there. The things, the different ways from one decision that impacts our lives.
Well, it sounds like the book would be titled Parallel Lives.
I guess so. And I guess I have to start working on it.
You got to start writing it, So how long was it that your parents grappled with leukemia, and did they get diagnosed around the same time, or how did that come about?
My father was 78 when he was diagnosed, and he was 83, almost 84 when he passed away. So what happened is my youngest sister is much younger than the rest of us. She was an oopsie baby. So there's 17 years between my oldest sister and my baby sister. So, of course, her kids were very young. She had 2 kids, a girl and a boy. And my father just loved, his grandson. He had another grandson, but this little one, they were just very, very close. And they were eating together one time, and my nephew had a cold, and my father, not even thinking about it, they were sharing some mashed potatoes with the same fork. And my dad ended up in the hospital with pneumonia, severe pneumonia, in the local hospital, which things weren't going very well. And of course, my sisters are frantic calling me out here. What do we do now? So we got him transported to the hospital, actually, that I trained at and got my respiratory therapy degree at. And basically, it was pneumonia. He was in the hospital for a couple of days. The day they were getting ready to discharge him, an older sister was there. And right before they discharged him, the doctor came in and looked at his chart and said, "Excuse me a minute," and he walked out. And they're looking at each other, and it took about an hour later for him to come back in and said, "We want to run some more tests." So basically, he had already been, he had leukemia, and already he never had felt any effects of it. But because his immune system was so compromised, that cold that my nephew had gave him pneumonia. So it was like, well, okay, at least we know. And he was diagnosed with 2 types of leukemia. One is CLL, which is very common in older people, and you can live with it for a very long time. The other one was it MDS? and I can't remember the technical term, the myoplastic something dysplasia. And that was the one they really wanted to keep an eye on. Of course, my mother was like, phew, and she was just frantic. And I always thought, Mom, calm down. You're going to worry yourself sick over this, and guess what? 18 months later, she was supposed to have just a routine, procedure, and they did the blood work, and the doctor said, we need to do some more work. There's, we're finding something in your blood. And she looked and said, that sounds like leukemia. And they did a bone biopsy, and she had the MDS. So she had the exact same kind that my dad did, except she only had the one that was more serious. And my mother was a very intelligent woman, and very curious. And, she was like a dog with a bone. Once she got an idea in her head, she was going to chew on it until, she got all the information she wanted. And she kept saying to all the doctors, this has to be environmental. It has to be environmental.
Well, that's like the first one under my mind. If they both have like the same, that's an interesting thing.
What are the chances? So, there is one chemical called benzene that's, really associated with it. But, for the next probably 5 years, I think it was, that my mom had it, 5 or 6 years, even a lot of their friends did not know. A lot of only the very, very close family knew. You wouldn't be able to tell by looking at them. My mother looked beautiful. You couldn't tell she was sick up until the day she died, except for, of course, the PICC line. And my dad was starting to really show signs, once my mother was really failing. And it was really funny. It was almost like my mother was hanging on, waiting for him to catch up with her.
Right. Isn't that interesting? And I wonder if there really is something to that. And I mean, that's a whole nother conversation to explore, just the ability of the mind to affect our health to some degree. I mean, this is why the placebo effect is accounted for in scientific research, right? Because it's you can give someone, they think they're getting a medication. You could basically have the amount of medication they're getting, and the mind sort of somehow bridges the gap. Like it's quite something to think about. And so, what ages were your parents when they passed?
My mother was just past 80. It was about 3 months after her 80th birthday. And my father was about 3 months shy of his 84th birthday.
Okay. And they both had leukemia for a number of years.
Yeah, it's at least 5 or 6 years, I think.
So in a sense, because, I'm actually going back to how you were grieving your ex-boyfriend, I guess, his loss of wife more than your parents. And I wonder if there's an element of, the first grieving maybe comes when they get the diagnosis, and you wonder how much time do we have left with them, and you begin to already sort of process the upcoming loss, I guess, if I could put it that way. Do you think there was anything like that took place?
I think that could be it. That could have a lot to do with it, because there are always like steps of like, okay, another treatment, or okay, another hospitalization. But I have to tell you, up until the very last 2 or 3 months, maybe 2 months of their lives, we laughed a lot.
Yeah.
We really did, even though, the blows were coming. And I remember when my mother, because they both had the chronic form of the MDS. And when my mother actually went from chronic to acute, I got that phone call. I was getting ready to drive up to Boulder, Colorado, because we were doing like this huge national convention for the Feldenkrais practitioners, or for Feldenkrais. And I was going to, even as a student, I was a student, but I was going to teach a class, and I was helping to do a lot of things. And I got the news, and, my sister called and said, okay, this is what, my mommy just got tested again. This is what acute is, and this is what her numbers are. And I got it backwards, and I thought, oh, great, she's still, in the chronic phase. And it wasn't until I was pulling out of my driveway that it was like, oh, that means she has converted to acute. And the whole drive up to Boulder, it's like, my mother is dying. My mother is dying. And then I had to land in Boulder and just go right into service mode to help the people I was assigned to help, who were presenting. I had to teach a couple of classes. I mean, it was just a nightmare. And then, I drove home and then started to process, this is the beginning of the end.
Right.
So, so it was a long process of grieving. And along with that process of grieving came it's going to sound weird, the joy, the satisfaction, and the gratitude that I was able to fly back and spend so much time with them.
Mm-mm. Absolutely. Yeah. And I guess I'm kind of curious because I wonder if people would say this to you. Is there some comfort in the fact that they both lived, into like basically 80 plus years of life?
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Absolutely. Although I really expected both of them to live a lot longer,
Mhm.
because they were pretty tenacious, both of them. I'm sure you're shocked to hear that.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely shocked to hear that. Um, and totally random question. Like after you like left home, did you and your sister, your big sister, ever have any more wild cat fights?
No, we never did after a certain age, probably in our teens. That No, we never did that again. We got to be quite close and have a lot of fun and stuff together. So,
Yeah.
I think that was just the younger years. And of course, at this point, nobody's going to mess with me because they know I have skills. So
Yeah, which makes me think of a line from the movie Napoleon. I don't know if you ever saw Napoleon Dynamite, but
I
there's just a
didn't.
classic line like, "I've got skills, Napoleon." Anybody who's listening who's watched Napoleon Dynamite was quite a strange movie, but it's one of those ones that it doesn't make sense when you're watching it, but then when you think about it after the fact, you remember certain lines from it that are just ridiculous. And so,
That's
anyways,
hilarious.
there's one about "I've got skills, Napoleon." Um, and so, but somewhere along the way, we haven't even touched on this fact that you yourself suffered from chronic pain?
Yes, I had a chronic pain syndrome, and that started in my mid 30s. What started
Okay.
out as just mild discomfort and
Mhm.
tension in my low back and tightness, it quickly spiraled out of control within just a few months into a full blown chronic pain syndrome. And I lived that life of a chronic pain patient for 2.5 years.
Mm,
And,
mm,
I did everything that I was told. I went the Western medical way because
mhm.
I was Western medically trained. That's what I
Right, right.
knew. And so I took all the medications they gave me, the muscle relaxers, anti-inflammatories, and what was the other one? The painkillers. Oh yeah, let's not forget
Mhm,
that. And I did all the really stupid stretches and exercises that the PTs gave me, even though they weren't
mhm,
working.
mhm,
I was doing them. I was a good patient. I did, went to all the doctor's appointments, the massage therapy they wanted me to do, all the PT exercises and appointments. And instead of getting better, I got progressively worse until I spiraled so far down that, I wasn't working as much as I couldn't. I could only
mhm,
work part
mhm.
time. Instead of going to ballet and Pilates, I was going to doctor's appointments and PT appointments. And it wasn't until one of my doctors told me that I would never be able to do my laundry and my grocery shopping all in the same day because the arthritis in my spine was so severe, I would end up being bedridden.
Hmm.
And I just looked at her and I said, "You don't understand. I'm planning on going back to ballet class." And she laughed in my face and said,
Yeah.
"You don't understand. You are a
Huh.
chronic pain patient. You will never have the life you had before. You'll never have the life you wanted. You're too old for ballet anyway, so don't worry about it. And forget about going to PT school," because that was one of my goals. She said, "Even if you could do the work, which you can't because you're too injured and broken, you're just too old to go back to school."
Wow! I'm just, like, listening to all of this going, "Oh my goodness." Like, if you it sounds like a very discompassionate person with a lot of limiting beliefs if I was just to make my roadside
Yeah,
diagnosis here,
pretty
you
much.
know just to hear all of that, I think, like, you might have to break some difficult news to somebody, but to just put it that way, like, "Hey, you have no hope, you just give up on life."
Yeah.
Like, oof. Oh, man. I think there's something within the body. There is actually a pretty remarkable capacity to heal. Obviously, there's some limits to what it's capable of doing, but I think this is a part of your story is maybe the capacity of the body to heal in a way that wouldn't have thought possible. So you
Mhm.
get told all of these really harsh, like seemingly cold, discompassionate, just your life is going to suck for the rest of your life. You might as well just accept this and give up.
Mhm.
And that seemed
Exactly.
and that lit a fire in you, I gather.
Well, the last thing she told me, she recommended that I start applying for disability because I was going to need it. And keep in mind, I was 36 years old.
Ooh.
So I went home and I hit rock bottom for a couple of days. And
Mhm,
honestly, I don't even know what happened to me or where this came from. But I remember waking up one day and it was like, you know what? You deserve better.
mhm.
And this is your responsibility. This is up to you. Not only are they not helping you, they seem to be making you worse, and it was probably not intentional, but I was getting worse. And it was like, it is up to you to try and figure it out for yourself. And basically that's what I did. I fired my medical team, much to their chagrin, because of course I needed them. They had to take care of me. Stopped taking the medications. I stopped doing the exercises and the stretches. And the only thing I did I added acupuncture, which was a huge leap for this used to be Western medical mindset. I did acupuncture, and I taught myself how to move again. I just went back to how we learned how to move when we were children and babies. When we were babies, nobody gave us these little baby barbells and said, okay, do 10 repetitions and now put one arm here, push here, roll your head, and this is how you're going to roll over in the crib. We explored self-exploration, explored our environment. We played with movement. We played as we got older, played with other children outside, inside. That's how we learned to relate to each other, unless you were fighting with my sister. But that's how we learned.
Yeah.
And then once we get to school, that kind of gets taken away from us because we have limited playtime. Then we have organized sports, organized gymnastics, organized activities. And then when we graduate, from high school and college, then we're in the workforce. When something hurts, we get injured, we forget that we can figure it out for ourselves, or we just go running to the experts to say, fix it quick. I can't stand this pain.
Or this is inconvenience and to this busy life that I have. And so you need to make it better so I can carry on living my life.
Right. And the truth is, we all have the answer deep inside of us. And you're right, the body does have an incredible capacity to heal itself, as long as we give it the right environment in which to heal, for healing to take place. And that requires an awful lot of self-attention. And that doesn't mean being narcissistic or, me. It means the really getting quiet and listening to the signals that your body is telling you, and then responding to them.
Now, as a coach and one who teaches mindfulness and awareness and a lot of this, this is, of course, very relevant for me. But for those who are listening, this might sound a little bit like a foreign language, getting in touch with their body. What might that look like for someone?
First of all, turn off all of the devices for a while. You might want to take a break from technology a couple of times a day. It doesn't have to be like, all day, but take about 5 or 10 minutes, absolute silence, and just kind of listen to your thoughts. It's not meditation. I don't teach meditation. I don't even meditate myself because I have ants in my pants. And every time I try, it's just a, meditation failure. So I do my meditation through movement. But to really,
you're suited for a movement meditation.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. And that could be how another person, who's listening to this might start, is go outside. Instead of listening to your devices, listen to the birds, listen to the wind in the trees, listen to the distant traffic, listen to the dogs barking in the distance. Just really smell the air outside, really feel the ground underneath your feet, paying attention to yourself, starting to walk very, very slowly, almost taking cat-like steps in your yard. Little things like that are really going to start waking up your nervous system and activating that self-awareness.
And this is actually quite relevant and fascinating for me at the time of recording this as well, because I've been dealing with a hip issue that I haven't been able to find a resolution to. And I don't know if we talked about it when I was on your show.
No.
But I've seen chiropractors, osteopaths, physical therapists, massage therapists, somatic experiencing. So I've seen a laundry list of practitioners, and it's been a real struggle to come to any sort of conclusion as to what's going on. And I don't want to make this all about my hip because this is your story, but it's a curiosity to me. I'm actually going to see a different type of chiropractor tomorrow to see. And I've had not an MRI, ultrasound, because they're looking, okay, is there anything like strangely out of whack here? And the only thing I can think about is I had 2 motorcycle accidents in my early 20s, like 18 years ago. And somehow it's showed up again sort of in the last 2 years and just been getting progressively worse. And so it's like listening to this, because in my head I have this picture of being able to move freely. So I used to be into powerlifting, lifting heavy things, and I was just like the Tin Man. And I still really have the flexibility of a boulder, I joke, but and I'm kind of a sort of a thick guy, and so
Mhm.
I think about though like the way that people can move on, say like speaking of ninjas, like American Ninja Warrior and things like that, and um, just a different kind of strength and physical ability to move their body through space. And I go, I'm feeling kind of like pulled in that direction or drawn to that.
Mhm.
And it'd be really interesting to explore that. And I really would like to. So what you're describing here is kind of fascinating. So you started just like, because you maybe you had like a limited range of motion
Mhm.
and were being told.
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely. So, and basically your story is kind of like, yeah, it's my story too. And
Hmm.
it's the story of a lot of people who are listening. So I would love to, dig in a little bit deeper if it's okay with you. And I'm going to ask, I'm kind of curious how much time you spend sitting. Like
Quite a
how
bit.
much, okay, there you go. And what it's like for you to be in a chair, and I'm sure you have a chair that's really comfortable, but what you might want to start doing is taking like a towel roll behind your lumbar spine
Mm,
and giving you some support, because I'm kind of guessing you might be sitting in a somewhat flexed position. Just kind of guessing.
possibly. So I actually have a kneeling stool.
Okay.
Because sitting in a chair doesn't work for me. If I sit in a chair for any length of time, my left leg will start to tighten up and won't.
Ah.
So it like muscularly starts to lock up, and the IT band starts to tighten, and starts to pull, and it's like it takes a little while for that to work out. And right now, my pelvis is slightly twisted, so that I think my left leg is about an inch longer than my right leg.
Mhm.
And I don't actually, they're not actually like different lengths. It's that there's like some sort of rotation to my pelvis.
Mhm.
And so I've had like adjustments that can temporarily correct it, but it moves
Mhm.
back into this position. And so I've been like, this is really, it's a bit of a puzzle. And it's really affected my ability to train and be active because I can't really
Mhm.
load it up because it might just buckle.
Right. Well, this is a perfect opportunity for you to learn more about your body, more about your hips.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it really is. And that's kind of the shift that you have to make, because, when we have something like that, it's so annoying, it's frustrating, it's uncomfortable, and then it gets
Mm,
worse. And then our brain starts to go a little bit crazy. But it's like, what can
mm,
we do to help that hip? And I think what's happening is it's a pattern that you have,
yeah.
and that's why, the chiropractor can put you back in alignment. But if you go back into that same habit or pattern, boom, it's going to go back in that same position. Not because it's weak, it's because
Mhm.
that's what your body knows. And that's what
Yeah.
your neuromuscular system is telling you to do. Do you ever sit on one of those big exercise balls?
I don't. I have one. Um,
Oh, they're
I-
magical. Hmm.
yeah. Yeah. So what's interesting is I can cycle, and
Hmm.
I've cycled up to 50 kilometers because it doesn't require fully straightening my leg. And so I
Hmm.
can cycle 50 kilometers, but I struggle to walk 50 meters. Now
The
for I was like 50 yards for the American listeners. And like
yeah, thank
30
you.
miles, 30 miles and 50 yards. Yeah.
The other thing is the hip joint is one of my favorite joints because it's such a beautiful joint. And you've got the ball and socket and they fit
Mhm,
right
mhm,
in. And when the ball in the socket, I mean, it's a circumduction movement that the hip joint is capable of. But as in our modern society, we have a tendency to use the hip joint as a hinge, forward and back, forward and back, forward
mhm,
and
mhm.
back. It doesn't have the opportunity to do that rolling and sliding and gliding that is what the hip joint is meant to do, which means that the soft tissue around that joint will start to tighten up. It's not
Mhm, mhm,
necessarily a hip injury, but the soft tissue. So it's not necessarily the joint. And then
mhm,
when
mhm.
that happens, you get even less ability to rotate and you get even more limited movement. And a lot of times, then the movement will go to, well, my pelvis has to move. So your SI joint will try and compensate for the lack of
Yeah, yeah,
movement in your hip. So it's complicated, but not really.
which is
So,
cool. 'Cause I
yeah.
mean, I've had the physios that get in there and then they beat it up and they put me through agony and, and it's like, that's torturous. Then I've had the somatic experiencing, which is like super, super gentle. I've had acupuncture, but it's probably more sports acupuncture than
Mhm.
dedicated acupuncturist. So there is one who's on my list of people to check out, and
Mhm.
like the osteo and the chiro as well. Which is why I'm exploring a different chiropractor to see, like, okay,
Right.
what do they come up with, because they have a different way of adjusting that doesn't involve snapping, cracking, popping. Because
Right.
so that sort of thing. So we'll talk a little more offline because I think that is fascinating. But I wanted to really explore, because we haven't even got to how you became a ninja. And for those who are listening, what you don't see is behind Cheryl is a rack with a number of different swords, and I would gather other kinds of like ninja type weapons, or weapons that they would use in that culture. So you started to on your own journey of being told that you weren't going to have like any quality of life left, and you said, I don't accept that. So you hit pity party, you hit rock bottom, you just pouted for a little while, and then how did you get yourself out of that? What prompted you to go, okay, that's it, I'm tired of being in a pity party?
It was, I don't know, it was just this epiphany. I had this mental head smacking moment. And that was when it was like, you're not going to live like this. You deserve better. Your husband deserves better, and I was not going to live that life. I knew how I was living for the past 2.5 years. And it was so miserable that if it was even going to get worse, I didn't want to live at all.
Right.
And I really believe that, I believe there's a warrior in each and every one of us. I know that. I know that everybody has the warrior spirit inside of them, but I think I really got a double dose, and I didn't even realize it. And you could tell from my tenacity of trying to beat up my sister, who was probably 3 times my size and weight,
yes.
and a lot smarter than me at the time. But it was that tenacity of spirit that said, no, I'm not going to do this. It was that same spirit that says, no, I'm not going to stay here and let you, dictate my life. I'm going to Colorado and find my own way. Those things, it was that same kind of, no, I'm not going to do it this way. And so that's what it was. And I don't even know, it wasn't intentional or cognitive, or I didn't analytical. I didn't think through it. It was just like this big fat no, I'm going to figure it out on my own. And I did. And then I did end up
like that. Very technical, a big fat no. So I was presented with this option for the rest of my life, and I decided a big fat no.
A big fat no. And I've never used that term, or that phrase, but I like it. It's good. A big fat no.
I'm visualizing like these blue bubble letters that are like, and it was like, nope. And so then you say, okay, if this is not going to be the life I'm going to live, do you start, because very often I think we spend time, it's like driving down the road, staring in the rear view mirror. This is what I don't want. And we don't look through the windshield to go, that's where I want to get to. So how did this shift for you?
Well, I knew where I wanted to get to. I knew what I wanted. I wanted off the medications. I wanted my life back. I missed my ballet classes and my ballet friends. So it took more than just, oh, I'm in pain all the time. It took away my community. It took away my support system. It took away my passions that I had. I couldn't do anything. And that was the thing that was really driving me. And I can tell you, it was not easy. And there were days that I really wanted to just reach for the pain meds, and I had a very small stash. I kept them for probably 20 years. I still had the pill bottle with 1 or 2 pain pills in it, 1 or 2 muscle relaxers. And I kept them in my drawer. I even put them in my leotard drawer as kind of like a talisman, or, it's like, you are never going back there again.
Interesting. Because look, like I have a bottle of like, it's ibuprofen and whatever the muscle relaxant is, methylcarbamol, I think it is. And I never want to take them. Because in the beginning, when this started happening, I was using them because it was an easy fix in one sense. Like, okay, I take these and now I can walk normally again. But I was like, this is not like, I'm 40, so I'm still relatively young. And I was like, this is not the future that I want. And thus has, sort of started this journey of exploration. Like, if I'm having to take one of these a couple of times a week already, that feels like too much.
Right.
So I love that idea that you had this little talisman here reminding you that this is not what I'm going back to.
And so, sometimes you have to embrace your pain, and that's a really tough pill to swallow. To be,
to use a timely metaphor, it was a tough pill to swallow.
Exactly. But you have to embrace it. We want to run away from it, but if we could embrace it before it even gets too painful, if it's like, why is my hip feeling like this? Like when I get up after we're done today, it's going to be, those first couple of steps are going to be a little bit uncomfortable because of the way I'm sitting. I know that now, and I know what to do, and try not to have ants in my pants when we're recording, so I'm not shifting all over the place on the camera. But I know what to do. And it's like, it's your body saying, okay, you need to move this way. And if we start to listen to the smaller messages and the smaller aches and pains that we sometimes either try and ignore, or think it'll go away on its own, we start paying attention to those, then we can prevent ourselves from getting into a really bad situation. Dance with your pain.
Yeah, I like that. And so, I think about like crawling around in my basement, like I've got a pool table, for example, and it's like doing like the bear crawl on all fours or things like that. Yeah,
Have you
just
done that?
I've tried a little bit of it. Yeah,
How did that feel?
uh, a little bit awkward because I'm sort of like it's I'm discovering the sort of because I was so focused for so long on building strength and like
Mm.
getting a strong, like just brute strength
Mm-hmm.
that I didn't pay attention to my mobility.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like, oof, now I find myself, like I said, drawn to this. And it's like, well, where do I start? So, I purchased a mobility program, for example,
Mm-hmm.
but I couldn't seem to go through those. And the thing that was sort of lacking was, okay, how do you do this when you don't have the mobility, the progressions? And that's the
Mm-hmm.
challenge is that like mobility teaching often comes to these experts who are very mobile and they sort of show these modifications, but it's like,
It's not the same. No. Mm-mm.
not quite the
No.
same, because I know you can literally just bend over and like, just
Yeah.
about kiss your own backside from,
Yeah. Yeah.
that
Well,
kind
we'll
of thing.
talk more after the recording, but yeah. And I have to tell, I was so stiff and out of shape. I got out of my pain syndrome, but I was
Yeah.
stiff. I was out of shape. I was overweight, and boom, right away after I was pain free, I got accepted into my PT program, which was
Okay.
great. But it meant that I had to sit for like 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, as I was going through this program for 2 years. And when I finally graduated, I have never been that inflexible and stiff in my entire life. And I went back after I have figured I'm only 40. I'll be able to get back, just, do some Pilates, go to ballet class. I'll be fine. And my ballet master kept screaming at me, stand up straight, stand up. And I would just get so angry. And I looked at him and I almost yelled and said, I am standing up straight. But I glanced in the mirror and I was like this. I looked like a question mark, but to me that was straight because that's the position I had been in for so many years.
Right. Yeah.
So, but then it was a gradual way of getting the flexibility back. And now, I mean, I can do full splits forward and back, side to side. I've
And
never been this flexible.
so, and you are how old currently?
I'll be 66 in a few weeks.
Wow. Okay. So I was picking a little younger than that. I mean, I was trying to do some math together. Now,
Mhm.
of course, if I just bumped into you, I would not pick 66 for your age.
Thank you.
Like just straight
Thank
up.
you.
There's just no no way I'd be picking like, oh, I bet you're 66, right? Um, no, that like I was thinking maybe like 54-ish. And that was because you'd mentioned 33 years passing and having been in
Mhm.
university, right? So I was like,
Mhm.
probably like 50s-ish. So 66, and you can do the full splits.
Mhm.
Wow.
You'd be, I mean,
And in your
I'm
40s, you couldn't do this.
no, no, I could not do it. I could
Yeah.
not do it.
Wow. Like, and that in itself is like super inspiring and cool because it's like, if you couldn't do it in your 40s, because I'm 40 and
Mhm.
there's just a part of my brain that's rebelling against the thought that like, I'm going to be sort of somewhat crippled and in pain for the rest of my life. I'm like, no, I
No.
just haven't found yet that thing, that way
Mhm.
to kind of break free from that. So
Mhm.
when you were doing ballet and Pilates and dance, but then at some point in time, I know we're short on time because we've had there's
I
sort
know,
of
we went down some rabbit holes.
we did. But you've got a great story, and people are going to have to like check out your podcast as well. Which is it the Femininja Project? Is that what it's called?
Yes, the Femininja Project.
We'll definitely include the links because there's so much more to your story that's like really cool. But just what prompted you to take up martial arts? And because I know I had this thought in my mind, I was like, did your dad ever get to know that you were taking up martial arts, or he was?
He did. He did. My
Oh, yeah.
father even lived long enough to know that I got my third degree brown belt. So he knew that.
Wow.
And it's really funny because we would talk martial arts a lot and,
Oh.
talking about like the philosophy, the spirituality of it and everything.
Mhm.
And, we would share stories and, things that we wouldn't have talked, if he would have told me that before when I was like, I'm not going to listen to this stuff, ooh, martial arts, ick. Oh, but
Right.
yeah, so no, he knew. He actually came and watched a class
Yeah.
when I was a yellow belt, so I'd barely been training. But because everybody had to see is like they could see me dancing. They could see me as a
Yeah.
ballet dancer. They could see me doing on the ski slopes, all that stuff. But
Yeah.
nobody could have envisioned me, including myself, as a martial artist and being on the mat and doing Ninpo. Yeah, so he
Right.
did live long
Yeah.
enough to do that, or to see that, or to know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
which is
And
brilliant. And
and
your martial art involves weapons training as well, does it?
oh yes. Oh
Yeah.
yes. Yes. It is it's a really cool art. We are considered a soft art,
Hmm.
not one of the hard arts. So it's more like Aikido,
Mm-mm.
Judo, where you kind of like accept and absorb the person's energy and then turn it around and take them down. We're
Mm-mm.
more of a defensive art, so we're not like really super aggressive or anything like that.
Right.
The warrior spirit for us is the heart of a warrior is a heart of love and compassion,
Mm.
and a desire to take care of ourselves, our families, our communities, our environment. We love all living things, including the plants, the birds, everything. But we just have really strong boundaries, and we don't like people to
Cross those boundaries.
you got it.
Right. And yeah, because I think about like karate or karate, and because I did some of that as a martial art, and it's a very hard martial
It's
art, a
very hard.
very, and I tried a little bit of Wing Chun as well, which I thought was
Mm,
really interesting, just
mhm,
because it's more of a kind of a flowing martial art. But this sounds
mhm,
fascinating. So you
mhm.
could, in theory, you could walk in your superhero costume or something like that, or your superhero alter ego. You could be like walking down the street with a cane, pretending to be like a target, I guess,
Mhm,
a
mhm,
vulnerable, sweet older lady, and
mhm.
then somebody comes up, and all of a sudden that cane turns into a defensive weapon, and
Yeah.
yeah, and you teach.
Everything's a weapon. That's one thing that sensei told me before I ever stepped on the mat when he was
Mm,
sticking needles in me trying to get me on the mat to
yeah,
train with him, and it's like, "Everything's a weapon." I got, "You are really crazy. Who thinks like this?" But now
yeah,
it's like, "Oh, look at this knitting needle." You know?
right,
Yeah.
right. So is your sensei an acupuncturist as well? Is that?
Yes, that's how the whole thing started, and I mean, I know we've been talking a long time, so I don't want to, take too much more of your time. Sorry, kick the table.
That's okay.
Um, yeah, I don't want my hip to be too sore, but,
Hey,
yeah,
join the
he
party.
I know, we can commiserate,
Yeah.
but, yeah, I met my sensei when I was 44,
Mhm,
and
mhm.
what he didn't know when I first met him was that I had had a pretty traumatic experience just a few months before I met him. And the reason why I went to him was one of my clients I was working with says, "Oh, this guy that I go to, he's an acupuncturist. He does shiatsu, and it's you can keep your clothes on, and it's just very non-intrusive, non-invasive." So I went to him, and he says, "Well, I can help you with some of your symptoms with acupuncture if that's okay with you." And I said, "Well, sure." So the first time he started sticking needles in my legs, he got a very far away look on his face, and he said, with your legs and my coaching, I could teach you how to kill with these things." And I
Isn't
thought,
that something?
okay, so who thinks like this out loud or thinks like this, let alone says it out loud? And I wanted to just go running, grab my purse and run, but I was literally pinned to his table. So I was kind of stuck there. Another little pun for you. And, he's going on and on about his martial art and the art of the ninja. And his martial arts school was right next door to his clinic. It was like a duplex. And I said, I am not interested. There's no way. It is never going to happen. So just, zip it.
Yeah, yeah.
Long story, it took him 3 long years until I finally capitulated, and plus 2, the traumatic event started really rearing its ugly head about
Mm.
a year after I met him. It was bad. It was full-blown PTSD, and when I finally told him the entire story, what happened, and that's when his campaign to get me on the mat went into high gear, even though I kept saying no. And he said, "There is such a healing power in martial arts. I know it will help you, and it'll help you heal." And I'm just like, I don't understand how hanging around a smelly dojo with a bunch of sweaty men is going to make me feel better. No, I kept saying no. And so finally, 3 years later, I pretty much again had hit rock bottom. I had nowhere
Mm.
else to go. I had nothing else to try. I just finally I said, "Okay, you got me. I'm at my wit's end. I will take a few classes to learn a few self-defense techniques and to prove to you how much I'm going to hate it."
Yeah. Oh man, I hear like a parallel because I think back to 5 years ago, a coach that I worked with, and I was like determined to prove that he wasn't going to succeed working with me.
Yeah. Good
because
for you.
I was determined that like I was a failure. I was doomed to be a failure, destined to be a failure, and he wasn't going to succeed. I was literally just doing this to have one more reason to stay stuck in my victim mindset,
Yes.
you
Yes.
know.
Yeah.
And for some reason, he was just compassionate and patient and gentle and refused to give up on me, no matter how many times I tried to convince him he should give up on my worthless self. And lo
Mm,
and behold, here I am, right? And so it's funny just hearing some of these parallels here. And I've been through trauma, PTSD. We might just have to
right.
do like another episode,
I
at
would
some point.
love to. I would love. I could talk to you all day. It's like,
Yeah. We'll have to just record another episode, part two with the ninja,
mm,
um, because I had no idea you were even in your 60s, and
yeah.
so it's
And
like,
I'm still training. I mean, I still
yeah,
train at least 3 times a week. And this is another deep, dark secret I'm not sure that you know of, and I'm not sure if I should kind of drop the bomb right
well,
here
if people
on
listen
air.
like this far into the
Oh, that's
episode,
true. Okay. And if they didn't, they're going to miss a heck of a good tidbit because
yeah,
basically, when I turned 58, I decided it was time to start engaging in more age appropriate activities.
mhm.
So I started pole dancing.
Okay, how
Okay.
about that?
Uh-huh. I even competed 3 years ago. I did a competition. My coach talked me into it, and whew, it was one of the hardest things I've ever done. But
Yeah,
I did it. And getting that far out of your comfort zone, it just takes your confidence to a new level
no kidding.
that, I was giving a speech like a week later, to a networking group. And, I always get kind of nervous no matter how prepared I am. It
Sure,
was
yeah.
like,
Are you
what's the
kidding me?
worst that's going to happen?
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, I wonder if in one sense that you feel like obviously there's some physical, you know, ailments that still sort of exist for you, but do you feel like with your level of mobility, agility, sort of flexibility, just the ability to move your body around, do you feel younger now than you did 20 years earlier in your 40s with all your pain?
I feel younger at 66 than I did at 26.
Wow.
I feel I'm a lot more mobile. I'm really fit. I'm 66. I'm on no medications, which really perplexes any medical person, who does see me. It's like, you're kidding. You're not on anything. Do you want to get on something? No,
Yeah.
thank you. I'm fine.
Okay. Sure. You
Yeah.
sure? I mean, maybe we can get something for you,
Yeah, if we can get something, I know I can find something that's going to mess you up and screw up your metabolism and, mess with your head. But if I had known, if I had the ability when I was 30 to look through a crystal ball and see where I would be right now, I wouldn't have believed it. And if
Yeah.
somebody had told me that at this age, I'd be talking to someone like you. I will have a book on fitness over 50 and the ninja book and all this stuff. I'd be pole dancing. If somebody had told me that, I would have laughed and then I would have cried because I
Yeah.
knew in my heart it never would have happened. But, you know,
Here we are.
here we are.
Well, we're definitely going to have to do another episode because there's just so much to your story, and I absolutely love it. It's one of my favorite stories.
Oh,
Um,
thank you.
yeah, and you're just a delight to talk to. You bring a wonderful energy to the conversation. Your willingness to share, be open, be vulnerable is amazing. If people were to take one like nugget, one tidbit away from this conversation, if they've got this far, they've already got one like really cool nugget, one surprising one. But what nugget would you like them to take away from this?
I'd have to go back to that big fat no. Do
Okay.
not ever let anybody tell you what you can and cannot do. Do not ever let somebody place a label on you.
Hmm.
And just say no. Go your
Just,
own way. And if people don't like it,
and it's like, what's the worst that's going to happen if you do that?
right?
What's the worst going to happen when you show up into a smelly old dojo at 47 years of age, thinking this is never going to work,
Hmm.
and 20 years later, I'm going to guess a multi-level black belt. I don't know
I'm
what,
working on my 3rd level right now.
yeah,
Is what I'm
yeah,
doing. So,
which is just incredible, and you're
thanks.
feeling younger. So what an amazing story, Cheryl. Thank you so much for being on today. It's been truly a pleasure, and I look forward to when we get to chat for the Ninja Part 2.
Okay. Well, thanks, John. And if you can hang around after the recording, we'll talk about hip stuff.
Sounds good. Thank you so much for tuning in to Between the Before and After. If you've enjoyed this episode, please like, share, subscribe, or leave a review because that helps this podcast to reach and inspire more people. I love exploring the stories that take place between the before and after, the powerful experiences that shape who we become. And I love human potential. I love the possibilities that lie within us. So whatever you may be up against, I hope these stories inspire you. Because if you're still here, your story's not done yet, so keep moving forward.
Anyone can come from any place of brokenness and destitution and build an amazing life.